How are you guys? Welcome back to Wargaming China, their free channel where I platform my understandings of the war resistance against Japanese aggression in China from 1931 to 1945. Now it's over 70 episodes now, so you know what this channel is about. I'm happy I've got 147 subscribers. I'd like to thank you very much. I'd like to say people smash that like button now. Smash subscribe. I'm always after more subscribers. It's the only thing I do it for. I mean, this is a free channel. I just do this for fun. So today I'm going to have a chat about the Madsen M38 28mm 20mm autocannon in Chinese service. Now, the name Madsen and small arms. The name Madsen is synonymous in small arms with the Madsen LMG, which is the world's first LMG, and it was such a good LMG and so reliable that it was in service for over 100 years with varying militaries and police forces, and up until 2018 it was still in service with tactical police units in Brazil. And so Colonel V.H. Madsen is the man that the Madsen LMG was named after, and he was the Danish officer that first commissioned the weapon. And Colonel Madsen was going to spend the next 20 years tinkering, because what he wanted to do was to produce an autocannon using the same short recoil system. Now, it wasn't, even though the Madsen LMG was adopted and adapted into 34 different types of ammunition, calibers of ammunition, it wasn't such a simple thing to upgrade the LMG into a 20mm weapon. But eventually, by about 1933, he'd managed it. Now, the Madsen was made by the Dansk Industry Syndicate, or DISA, of Herlev, just outside of Copenhagen, for the Danish army, and it went into service with the Danes in 1938. And that's why we refer to it as that Madsen M938. Now, it had a lot of different mounts, up to 7 different mounts, and unfortunately when I started to go through the references for this autocannon, there were so conflicting and contradictory writings about how each mount was classified and the name for it. The mounts were all given F letters and then a number, from F1 to F7. Now, F5 was the light field mount, and the F6 was the universal field mount, and these were the 2 examples that China bought. She may have bought varying other types, but it's mainly the F5 and the F5 and the F7 that are referred to in Chinese service. Now, the Madsen autocannon was a fully automatic weapon, and you couldn't squeeze off 1 round at a time with this. It was 3 or 5 round bursts, and that helped with its penetration factors. Now, the Madsen originally developed this and marketed it as an anti-aircraft weapon, but they saw that there was lots of different uses for this weapon. So, as I said, they would develop several different mounts. I'll just give you a few of the names of the mounts. There was the light field mount, and this was the primary anti-tank mount. It could be folded up and stored on a motorcycle sidecar, and the whole weight of the unit weighed 137 kilos, 173 kilos. Now, the Danes, when the German army invaded on April 9th, 1940, had Madsens mounted on motorbike and sidecar combinations, and they did take a serious tally on German armoured vehicles, and they stopped 11 armoured cars and 2 Panzer I tanks. And if we look at how there's a great movie that shows this, it's called The 9th of April, and you should watch that. It's about the German invasion of Denmark, and Landsverk and Madsen 20mm feature in it. Now, the Madsen wasn't only just put in field mounts, it was also put on naval mounts, and it was the armament for and it was the armament for the Landsverk L, and it was the armament for the Landsverk armored car, and most armored cars that were either in a Danish service anyway were armed with the Madsen, and was an all-round weapon mounted on naval guns too, on Navy ships too, on what was called a triaxial mount. And I'll keep going through the names of the mounts. There was also a dedicated AA mount and a universal mount. And as I said, it was the light field mount F5 and the universal mount F7 that China procured. Now, China had been producing Madsen LMGs in various arsenals since 1911. So in 1937, when the sales team from Madsen came to China to demonstrate their autocannon, the Chinese really liked the weapon, and by 1937 China was crying out for 20mm weapons, because you've got to remember the 20mm weapon in Chinese service was all things. It was an infantry gun, it was an anti-aircraft gun, and it was an anti-tank gun, and China fielded both models of Oerlikons. She fielded Solothurns. In the 20mm ammunition bracket, China probably fielded just about every type of weapon there was. But today, as I said, we're going to focus on the Madsen. So, when China decided to buy the weapon, it was one of the more expensive weapons on the market. So China did procure a license, and I think it's the 51st Arsenal had a go at making Madsens locally in China, but it didn't go very far. They managed to make a few of the carriages, but the gun itself, the 51st, couldn't pull it off. Then later in the war, the 21st Arsenal had a crack at it, and they did 5 prototypes, but it was just not cost effective by that time, so production was dropped. So in total, between 1938, late 37 to 39, China received over 215 of these guns. Exact numbers are hard to come by, but yes, well over 215. Now, of course, China wasn't the only country to buy the Madsen 20mm autocannon. I mean, it was in service of Argentina, Belgium, Brazil, Portugal, Spain, Thailand, Finland, Greece, Iran. The list goes on and on and on. And of course, when the Germans got their hands on them, they pressed them into service wherever they could. And I'm not too sure if the factory was producing them for the Germans, but from the amount of photos I've seen, I think they were. Now, the Germans had a bewildering amount of mounts for these. They could be found, but mainly they served with second line units or Luftwaffe or naval formations. Now, getting back to in Chinese service. Now, the Madsen's one of the funny things, because in Chinese service, it's in universal service. So warlord armies, provincial armies like Hunan and Guangzhou, are buying Madsens, are getting Madsens. The NRA, the National Revolutionary Army, is getting Madsens, and believe it or not, the Red Army is getting Madsens too. So there's plenty of pictures of the Red Army with Madsens, and they're not. They don't seem to be that they've captured them off the nationalists. They've actually been issued them in one of the few cases, because the alliance. I wish I could know more about it. That's one of the things I study about the Xi'an incident and what deal was actually cut with the communists for support. But it certainly looks from photographic evidence that the Red Army was receiving Madsens by 1938. Now, what numbers were there to be found in? Well, Madsens were always in 4-gun companies. If they were an infantry gun, it was a 4-gun company. Anti-aircraft gun, 4-gun company. Anti-tank gun, 4-gun company. But, 4-gun company, for Madsens. Now, we have to be very, very careful as to how they were distributed. If we look at, like say, a Germanized division, there probably were issued to some Germanized divisions, perhaps 4 to a division to serve as the anti-tank gun. But if we looked at the Red Army, it would probably be a division would have 4 in it, and it would be, then those 4 would have to serve as the anti-tank, the anti-aircraft, and the infantry guns of a division. And if we looked at a provincial army, it might be much the same. So certainly well in service. A lot of authors say that the Madsen was not much in service after 1939, 1940, but just as many photographic references show that it was, and recently, in more recent accounts, there are references to Chinese requests for ammunition and use of this weapon up until 1945. So what I wanted to do was compare it with something. So what I thought I'd compare it to was the Solothurn. Now, the Chinese had Solotherns, as well as I said, just about every other type of 20mm weapon you could think of. But I thought we'd just compare the Madsen to the Solothurn because they were developed around about the same time. And, it's good to look at something compared to its contemporary. Now, as I said before, a lot of the information I found when I look up is always going to be contradictory. I don't know why that is, but I suppose the more information you have, if you had no information at all, you found one book, there'd be no contradictions. But by the time you're looking through, 10 or 20 references, there of course contradictions crop up. So we'll try to ignore them. And so, as I said, we will start to compare the two. Now, the Madsen was fed by 10, 15 or 60 round drums fed on the left side of the gun. The Solothurn was fed by 5 or 10 round magazines. The weight of the Solothurn was 54 kilos, and the weight of the gun itself, just the gun, was 54 kilos, and the weight of the Madsen was 55 kilos. Now, cartridges is where they differ. Now, bearing in mind this is the later type Solothurn, I think it's ST18. So the cartridge for the Madsen was a 20 by 120mm, and the cartridge for the Solothurn was 20 by 138mm. The Madsen fired a 301 gram shot slug, and the Solothurn a 260 gram slug. Muzzle velocity for both weapons is the same, but there are some references that say that will put the muzzle velocity for this is the same at 750 meters a second, but there are some references for the Madsen at 900 meters a second. But I think that's for the neck 23mm round. Weight with its carriage. The Madsen on its universal mount was 173 kilos. The Solothurn on its universal mount, was 260 kilos. So a big weight differential. Practical rate of fire. The Madsen was 175 rounds a minute. The Solothurn was 200 rounds per minute. Now we get to what you really want to know about armoured penetration. Well, I'm not going to tell you, because that is where I just couldn't get any two sources that agreed. Even when I looked at American sources, some said they were used against a face-hardened plate, and others against just steel plate. So what I'm going to say is that Solothurn was effective in China against Japanese tanks up to a range of 450 meters. And the reason it was effective was because it was an automatic weapon, so they were firing bursts at the Japanese tanks. And as I said again, it's a 20mm weapon, so they'll stop tanks, but they won't destroy them. This was the thing about anti-tank rifles and 20mm weapons. Yes, you can stop a tank, but that tank will be salvageable. You can't destroy a tank with these weapons. What else? Yeah, so the armor penetration would have been good enough for Chinese, for use against Japanese tanks. So that's the Solothurn in Chinese service. As I said, so Hunan, Guangzhou, Red Army, NRA, over 200 imported. The ammunition was either made in Denmark. For the Chinese ammunition was either made in Denmark or the UK. People they're asked the source that said they couldn't get ammunition. Well, the UK was making this ammunition before the war, even though they weren't using it in service. So I don't have any doubts that they would have got some to China. Some ammunition would have been sent to China. China would have got some ammunition from the UK. All right. I think that's all we need to talk about. I think that's all there is to say about the Madsen 20mm autocannon. Thanks for your time. Press like and subscribe. See ya.